LSU spring practice is over. Are we any closer to answers on the offensive line? Let's discuss. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you so much for that. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. LSU wrapped up spring practice on Thursday, less than a week ago. And so I wanted to take some time to evaluate what maybe we learned about several different position battles throughout spring that we were keeping an eye on now that in totality spring is done. And there's no better place to start than with the offensive line because it was the single biggest question this team had going into spring. Listen, we were all excited to see the transfers, the defensive ends coming in, which all played really well. Some of the really talented wide receivers, Bauer Sharp coming in at tight end as well. There was a lot of reason why we were excited to see those guys. But there was no more important position group and no bigger question, no more important question for LSU to answer, maybe is the best way to say it, for 2025 than the offensive line. Because of what you lose, you have 4 starters going out. And it's not just 4 starters. It's 4 starters that were high-level starters that played a long time together. Will Campbell, Emory Jones, Miles Frazier, Garrett Dellinger played a combined 171 career collegiate football games. And it's not just that they played a lot of games. It's that they played a lot of games together. You go back to 2022 when Brian Kelly arrived, and in that first spring, he immediately made the decision about 3 practices and that Will Campbell, it was time. He was the best guy they had. They put him in at left tackle, and he never left. And by the time he got to week 3 of that 2022 season, Emory Jones was the starting right tackle. And although Garrett Dellinger started the 2022 opener at center, you may recall that, after that he moved to guard. At left guard, he never left. And Miles Frazier played right guard his 3 years in Baton Rouge. So it wasn't just that they were talented players or talented players with a lot of experience. It was talented players with a lot of experience and played a lot of games together as a unit. Now, it is also fair to ask, were they really as good as we thought? Now, I think they're exceptionally talented, and you're seeing a lot of that manifest now throughout the draft conversation. Will Campbell, I think, is going to be the 4th pick of the draft to the New England Patriots. Miles Frazier is a guy who was voted the best lineman on his team the week of the Senior Bowl. Emory Jones is probably going to be a 2nd-round pick, and a lot of teams like him at both tackle and guard, likely a guard at the next level. So that's showing you have talent. And by the way, you can look at some of the Pro Football Focus grades as well. But what's interesting about the Pro Football Focus grades is that it's very heavily weighted toward pass blocking as opposed to run blocking. For example, Miles Frazier had an 88 pass block grade. His run block grade was a 64. You could look at Garrett Dellinger. His pass block grade was an 80.9. His run blocking grade, a 69. Even Will Campbell, 80.6 pass blocking grade, 69.7 run blocking. Doesn't it sort of manifest? Doesn't it make sense? Like the numbers support what our eyes saw. They were very good at keeping Garrett Nussmeier upright and giving him time to throw. They were not so great at run blocking, which is why LSU finished last in the SEC in rushing offense, which is almost unconscionable to think there was a time where Les Miles was just a ground and pound, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And that's how LSU built its name and its reputation. And now you got a team that finished 107th in the country in rush offense and last in the SEC. But that's what LSU was a year ago. And I think it's a fair question to ask of that unit that is on the way out. And then I promise I'm going to dovetail this into the new guys coming in. I'm just laying some context and some groundwork. I think it is a very fair question to ask. Did Jaden Daniels cover up a lot of their shortcomings as far as run blockers? I was doing an interview on a New York Giants affiliate in New York a week ago, And they had me on because they wanted to talk about the LSU guys, and notably, of course, Malik Neighbors was drafted by the Giants a year ago. So, what prospects might they be keeping an eye on? We talked a lot about Mason Taylor. We talked about Savion Jones and Braden Swinson, but we also talked about the offensive linemen. And that was one of the points I made is Jaden Daniels. I remember the first snap of Jaden Daniels' career at LSU against Florida State in the Superdome. They were out of the shotgun. Immediately pressure came. He dodged the pressure and ran for 25 yards around left end. That was all Jaden Daniels. I mean, the offensive line was just a sieve. The pressure came right through, but Daniels turned that into a 25-yard run because Jaden Daniels was magnificent. As we're seeing, he was a cheat code. In college, he's amazing in the NFL. So I think it's fair to wonder, how much of that reputation was built statistically because Jaden Daniels was so awesome. Now, I think it is completely warranted as far as pass protection. That bore out with both Jaden and with Garrett Nussmeier. Those guys were awesome. How can they kind of get the running game going is going to be a massive part of that. So you lose these four guys with a world of experience, and you have a lot of pieces coming in, which we'll discuss here in a second, that went through this spring. You've got talent that you recruited. Tyree Adams and Weston Davis, your two tackles, were both top 100 prospects. Insanely talented. Weston Davis was a 5-star. Cohen Eccles was a high 4-star that you flipped from Texas A&M. You've got incredible talent. I mean, you've got Carius Kern and Solomon Thomas, a couple of 5-stars that were early enrollees and recruited in this class. And then you went and got Braylon Moore out of the transfer portal from Virginia Tech, who was an all-conference center. And you went and got Josh Thompson, who was a multi-year starter at Northwestern and one of the best, most versatile offensive linemen. So you have plenty of pieces, talent and experience and depth. What you don't have are the three things that I tied together from the unit you're losing. Talented guys who had a lot of experience and a lot of experience together. So that's really the onus on this team, and why the offensive line in spring was so important was to try to build some continuity for these guys. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that Paul Mabenga was asked. I'm sorry, it was DJ Chester, forgive me. DJ Chester was asked this at one of the media availabilities during spring is, does he see this line building continuity?
I do, because one, we're a very tight group. We do stuff. We all love each other. We all trying to play for each other. And I feel like the ball game helped us. So we just didn't come out in the spring we haven't really played with each other. The 15 bowl practices helped a lot because we got to know how each other plays, how certain stuff that they like, certain stuff they don't like. I do, because one, we're very tight.
And remember, those 15 bowl practices were important. It's very important for all the reasons we talk about. Especially now, bowl games don't matter as much, but the 15 practices, especially because you have guys into the transfer portal and guys who opt out to go, the bowl practices really are an additional spring, something if you're an everydayer, you probably remember us talking about back during the bowl practices. Just think a year ago at this time, how important that bowl game was for Garrett Nussmeier to be able to start that game against Wisconsin after Jaden opted out. But all that to say, yes, the bowl practices were very important for continuity, but at that point, you didn't have Braylon Moore. You didn't have Josh Thompson. You didn't have Carius Kern and Solomon Thomas. And those are all guys that are rotating in the two deep. So it's even changed just from January to now. And that's why this spring was so critically important. So what did we learn with this offensive line this spring? That's what we're going to hit on next. And you're going to hear from Brian Kelly and DJ Chester and Paul Mabenga, all as we continue Locked on LSU, your team every day. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trademaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's at supplyhouse.com. So now that spring is over, and we've had this opportunity for these guys to go out there, get 15 practices, one of the most common things we talked about through all of our spring recaps and whenever we had media availability was the revolving door, was the turnstile on the offensive line. Seemingly every time the media was allowed to go out and watch practice, we were seeing different combinations on the offensive line. DJ Chester was taking reps at center and at right guard. Josh Thompson, the Northwestern transfer, initially was taking reps at right tackle, but in the spring game, we saw him, or the spring scrimmage, we saw him taking reps with the ones at left guard in place of Paul Mabenga, who, of course, started the last month of the season at left guard when Garrett Dellinger was injured. We saw Carius Kern take reps at second team left tackle. We saw Solomon Thomas run with the twos and the threes. So we saw so many different combinations, and Brian Kelly effectively said, yeah, that was by design.
Well, I think we've made great progress in building versatility within the group. I think in one sense, we've been clear that the mandate was not to go through the spring and name 5 guys. And so if we went in with that goal, we would not be anywhere near that. But that wasn't the goal. The goal was to get guys in position where we could find out what the best fit was for them individually and for us as a unit and then as LSU as a football team. So it's been moving guys around and finding where the right fits are. And then we'll go into camp and probably say, all right, through the first 8-9 practices will give us some time to make the decision on what that unit is and then build continuity through the back end of preseason camp with the starting 5.
So my one question about, and by the way, I believe him. I would say actions speak louder than words. And the fact that every time we went out there, we saw different rotations tells you they weren't just trying to name a starting 5. They were just trying to get a look at everybody in different spots to see who fits where. And then you'll go into fall camp and you'll let those guys battle it out for jobs. And then somewhere right at the end of fall camp, when you're about 2 weeks out from the opener against Clemson, they'll pick a starting 5 and then they'll start getting ready for Clemson with that starting 5. And as you heard Brian Kelly say, building continuity. The question is, can you build continuity in 2 weeks' time? Now, Brian Kelly has been a head coach, high-level, successful head coach for a long time, and I've said since the day he was hired, the 2 positions that he has pumped guys into the NFL more than any other have been tight end and offensive line. So I believe him that he knows what he's doing and how they're trying to figure it out here. But it is also very obvious that they're using a bunch of different combinations on the offensive line and following this timeline. Now, the timeline does hold because that's what they did last year, by the way, in the secondary. But we very quickly saw a change. I want to remind you, Zy Alexander was coming off a knee injury, and it took Zy really that first month of the season. In fall camp, he was running with the threes because he was just getting back into game shape and speed. And by the time you got to the end of September, he was back starting and your best guy. But remember, Sage Ryan played boundary corner the first game of the season against USC because they felt like they needed that experience out there. And it didn't go great. And after that, they moved him to safety. But all that to say, they did use camp to try to figure out those first 2 weeks of fall camp, try to figure out who was going to play where, and then they started getting ready for USC. So yes, that's what they did last year in the secondary. It stands to reason that's what they're going to do here in with the offensive line. But it's something else like Paul Mabenga said when he met with reporters on Thursday after that final practice, talked about using so many different combinations.
It's been very good being able to put in different pieces and see how it works out. And one thing I'll take pride in is nobody had ill intention towards nobody. And that's something that as an O-line we take pride in. Those guys that came in, we embraced them like they were one of our own. And it's been great being able to just seeing different things, seeing different people do their things. And that's something I've been very proud about.
The one other follow-up from Mabenga is where he said they found the biggest improvement in spring.
Our physicality and technique. That was one of the main points throughout the spring. Just being able to run off the ball, being able to move the line of scrimmage. That's something we've definitely take pride in, and I think we did a great job of. And Coach told us at the end of practice today that we've done just that, and it's about being consistent now, applying ourselves, whatever it might be, meeting about it, walking through about it. That's a mindset, and that's something we're going to continue to do.
So remember, we talked about the great pass blocking grades for LSU this past season. We'll look at the run blocking grades of the guys returning. It's very similar. Cohen Eccles, we've seen take reps at center and guard with the ones. A run blocking grade of 64, a pass blocking grade of 85. Bo Bordelon, pass blocking grade of 84, run blocking grade of 65. I mean, we can go down the list. Weston Davis, pass blocking grade of 74, run blocking grade of 61. I mean, it's just DJ Chester. He was your weak link last year all around. His pass blocking grade was a 64. His run blocking grade was a 49. Paul Mabenga, who started that last month, a pass blocking grade of 42, a run blocking grade of 42. The man you just heard from, it was bad all the way around. Tyree Adams, who's very likely going to be your starting left tackle, pass block rate of 58, a run block rate of 53. Not good, okay? And those were guys that played limited action. But, the other thing that Mabenga said there is focusing on physicality, right? And it's something that DJ Chester also talked about was the physicality to get better in the run game.
Coach Sloan has emphasized it. When we first came in the spring, he said, hey, guys, we got to get better at running the ball and finishing the red zone. Because I remember multiple times last year, we would get down in the low area and we couldn't score, and that sucked because it's like we get all the way down there and we can't finish. So that's been another emphasis in spring, working on the red zone, working on scoring, and working on running the ball.
We saw that in the spring game, right? Joe Sloan was in his bag. They ran six goal line plays, scored on 5 of them, different formations, and it's going to be exciting to see. But a big part of that is you got to be able to line up and run the ball when you need to. And look, the first possession of the season last year, LSU against USC drove all the way down the field, got on the doorstep, tried to go for it on a 4th down, got stopped, got no points. That's something that they do have to fix. But, this spring was a lot about this competition. That's something else Paul Mabenga talked about. And I want to make a comp to one of the best teams in LSU history because I think it's interesting how you might see some parallels. We'll get to that as we wrap up Locked on LSU, your team every day. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena. And with Gametime, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. I love Gametime for many reasons, most notably the all-in pricing. It means there's no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay, and they have last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. I think LSU going into 2025, the offensive line reminds me of one of the best teams in LSU history, and that was the 2011 team. Now, we know 2011 ended ingloriously, but if you remember that team, they went undefeated in the regular season. They won the SEC championship and would have been a national champion other than the fact that Alabama got a rematch it didn't deserve. After losing to LSU on their home field, they basically got a mulligan. But that LSU team, especially the offensive line, wasn't necessarily loaded with superstar players that went on to be high draft picks or long NFL careers. But what you had on that team was 10 guys, the entire two deep, who had all had experience as starters in the SEC. it was 9. And then you had a true freshman who was a 5-star in Lyle Collins, who was your backup left tackle, who became, your longstanding NFL player off that team. Would have been a first-round pick, but for the draft night drama that surrounded him that week, unfortunately. But all that to say, if you go back and look at that offensive line, PJ Lonergan was your starting center, but you had T-Bob, who both played center and offensive guard. If you go look at the rest of your offensive line, like your offensive guards, Will Blackwell was an All-American that year. Josh Dorosic played both left tackle and guard on that team. Josh Williford was a starter. Matt Branch was a starter for you as well. You had young players on that team like Trey Turner, Elliott Porter. I mean, you had some real dudes on that team. And when you look at the tackles, you had Chris Davenport, you had Chris Falk, who was your starting left tackle, Greg Shaw, who was a starter at both left and right, who backed you up. We had Lyell, as I mentioned, then Alex Hurst was your starting right tackle. Your two deep was loaded with guys that had started. Now, the only one of the guys I just mentioned that went on to a great NFL career among the regulars was Lyle Collins, and Trey Turner obviously did later as well. But the point being, it was guys that bought in and were cheering for each other and knew their roles, and you saw rotations pretty regularly among those 10 guys. And if somebody went down, you could shuffle and not miss a beat. And that team was a dominant team offensively because of the offensive line. They had great skill guys. Of course, you had 5 talented running backs and very good receivers, notably among them Ruben Randall on that team. Odell and Jarvis were freshmen on that team. You lacked a lot at quarterback, we know, but the offensive line allowed you to function within your entire offense, and those guys all bought into their roles. And that's something like what Paul Mabenga was talking about, and here he is talking about the competition among these guys right now.
It's been great competition, healthy competition. Knowing Coach Davis, the way he recruits, he always brings people that cares about this program, and you can tell those people that he brought in care about this program. And our mindset is from going to an A to A+. So definitely focusing on the technique, execution, that's been the main point throughout this whole spring, and I think we've done a good job of that so far.
If I had to guess right now, coming out of spring, what that offensive line is going to look like when LSU lines up against Clemson on August the 30th, this is what I think is going to happen. And this is what's odd, because the two guys that you have returning from last year who played significantly are Chester and Mabenga. And I think those are the two guys in jeopardy of losing their spot. Remember, when Garrett Dellinger went down, Mabenga started the final month of the season and the bowl game. So he started the final 5 games of the season. And Chester started all 13 games at center. But DJ Chester is a natural guard. He's 6'6", 320. You don't see centers that are usually that big. So he's a more natural guard than a center. And so it was interesting to watch him get as much run as he did at center this spring, considering they brought in Braylon Moore from Virginia Tech. Listen, they didn't bring in... When Brian Kelly was hired, I'll give you a comp. When Brian Kelly was hired, one of the first things he did is he went in the portal and he signed Jaden Daniels out of Arizona State. And this is going to sound funny to say it now with the benefit of hindsight, but at the time, there were not a lot of people that were wanting Jaden Daniels to be the quarterback. Miles Brennan was the fan favorite, the guy who had waited his time, had battled injury. He was the high school recruit who waited his turn, loved LSU, all that sort of stuff. And the point I made then over and over and over again, much to the dismay of many people at the time, was they didn't go add Jaden Daniels to sit. They brought him here to start. They knew what they had in Miles Brennan, and they needed more, especially behind that young, what was at the time a young, leaky offensive line. They didn't want a statuesque quarterback. They wanted someone who could make plays with his feet, and that was Jaden, and it worked. I'm going to tell you the same thing about Braylon Moore and Josh Thompson. They didn't go add those guys out of the transfer portal to sit. They added those guys because they knew what they had coming back on the offensive line and needed to go reinforce their offensive line. So I think Mabenga and Chester are two guys that aren't going to be in the spots. That would be the only two returning from the spot from a year ago. But as I just went through with the Pro Football Focus grades, those were two of your lowest rated players. So what I think will happen, and we'll set this on record and we'll see how it all plays out by the time we get to August and fall camp. I think from left to right, you're going to have Tyree Adams as your left tackle. And I think Josh Thompson is going to be your starting left guard. Brian Kelly showed you a little glimpse of that in the spring scrimmage. I do think Braylon Moore will be your starting center. He's an all-conference center from Virginia Tech. He was the top center in the portal. It's why you brought him here. A veteran guy who is elite, can handle all the calls, the blocking schemes, all that stuff. I think DJ Chester starts at right guard. I think he moves from center to his more natural spot at guard, and that's going to serve him tremendously when he's not going to have to think about the play calls and the blocking assignments and all that stuff. It's going to be put your hand on the ground and throw around 6'6", 320 pounds and road grade people. And then Weston Davis at right tackle. That's what I think is going to be your starting offensive line when LSU plays Clemson. Now, does that stick? We'll see. Can they stay healthy? Rarely does that ever happen. It's why your depth is going to be so important and why buy-in from all the guys like Paul Mabenga talked about in this unit is going to be important because it's inevitable. You're going to, at some point during the season, see somebody go down, have to turn an ankle, shuffle a spot, however it's going to be, and you're going to need that great depth as you continue to build. So the single biggest question LSU had going into spring was the offensive line. I don't know that they answered the question about the offensive line. I do feel like Adams and Davis have established themselves right now as your first tackles, and all the rotation is coming on the interior of that offensive line where you have great numbers, including Cohen Eccles, who we just mentioned as well. So how all that plays out in fall camp is going to be fascinating to watch. But I think if nothing else, you feel like you've solidified your tackles coming out of spring and going into fall camp. You have a healthy rotation on the interior that's probably going to end up landing on the one guy that started every game a year ago moving positions, and your two transfers coming in starting on the interior where I think they're going to be best. LSU's got a great quarterback. They've got great skill guys. You've got to have the engine that can make it all go, and that's your offensive line. So maybe I should say it this way. Your offensive line is like the tires on the car. You can have the big explosive, the big powerful engine. You could have the beautiful body and all that sort of stuff. If you don't have tires, like, it's not going to move. You have to have the tires. And I think for LSU, that's the offensive line. They've got everything else. You got to get the right tires on the thing to make those wheels spin and make this offense go. And they took some big strides here, the 15 spring practices to getting there. Okay, y'all, that's going to do it for us here today on Locked On LSU. Thanks so much for making this your first listen. Now for your second listen, how about you go check out Locked On NFL Draft as your favorite collegiate players get ready for the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. You can find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hey, thanks so much for making us your first listen. Again, if you're on podcast, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know that if you love the Tigers, if they love the Tigers, we got you here every day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.